When someone's phone's gone off.
Several hundred.
Exactly. I always think it's a good point to ask everyone to turn their phones off. Because we all forget, and I often forget. So. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Meeting commences at 2:33 and their ongoing cultural and connections to the lands and waters of the New South Wales lands. The recording of meeting, members and the public are advised that the proceedings of this meeting, other than any confidential matters, will be recorded and made publicly available on the council website, and persons attending the meeting should refrain from making any defamatory statements. Members may attend meetings. It's not that the public may attend meetings with approval of council. A request by a member of the public for approval to attend a meeting by audio visually. Oh, sorry, that's by the House members. I don't think that's applying. We're all present, aren't we?
Yes.
Apologies. Do we have any apologies? If we're all present, we have no apologies. Confirmation of the previous. Oh, sorry. Well, we don't have any apologies. Do we need? All right. We have a mover.
Oh, does he count?
I think so.
Okay. Does staff count? I think staff count.
Do they?
Well, they do in my council.
Oh, well, we note the, yes, all right. We have an apology from Chris Jackson, who's attending a training session. Can I have a mover to accept the apologies? Thank you, Councillor Member Fry and Member Smith. Thank you. Minutes, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting, which from memory were the 22nd, was it? 11th of February. Held at the council chambers here. Can I have a mover, please? Member O'Connor. Seconder, please. Member Ewan. Any issues arising out of the minutes?
Mr. Chair, and I've done nothing about it. One of the topics of discussion was to look at the times of the meetings and the minutes. We haven't got anything yet, so could I just have it noted that maybe for the next meeting that we actually come back with a report on potential options for the county council, so the June meeting, that we look at potential options. So ask the GM to come up with some varying options, whether we stay at the same time or look at a different day or a different time.
Right, well, I think later today we're endorsing the meeting schedule and times, but okay.
We could still amend that.
Could still amend it. Should it be raised now or should it be raised at that
I'll
stage?
raise it also then, but it is a matter arising from the February meeting.
You'll note it's a matter arising, but it's probably more substantively raised when we get to the meeting schedule later. Any other issues arising from the minutes? All those in favour of the minutes being accepted?
No.
Yes, thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest? And if they're in relation to confidential matters, could I ask that they be no names mentioned, please?
Okay, well, I
Call it the applicant.
have worked with one of the applicants.
That probably doesn't preclude you from voting unless you are currently employed by them or have a relationship with them. We know that you have worked with them previously.
Probably 6 years ago.
About 6 years ago. Any other disclosures of interest? Could I have a mover and seconder to disclose, accept the disclosure? Member Connor.
I'll move it.
Member Leslie, thank you. There are no presentations, so we move on to management reports. Item 1 is the issue we just raised, I believe, is the updated council meeting schedule for council
Chair. So leave number 1 and number 2, that the general manager provide an options paper to the next meeting on times and days for future meetings of the county council.
So that's in lieu of adopting the proposed meeting schedule, or do you?
Yeah, so adopt number 1, adopt the current proposed one. Number 2, that the GM provide to the next meeting.
Is there a second of the amendment? Councillor Fry, Member Fry. Discussion in relation to the proposed.
I think I've said enough unless someone else
Yes,
wants to add.
discussion in relation to the proposed recommendation as amended.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think if everybody wants to put their preferred time out of session to the general manager to then something to work with, I suppose. I think that's the way we can do it.
Can I just ask, does anyone have preferences for times? Are we looking at earlier or later, or obviously, Member Reynolds, you have a view because you're pushing this book, raising this.
Two things that I'd like to look at is day of the week, whether this is there's a better option of a day in the week, and then secondly, whether a lunchtime meeting, say 1 o'clock meeting, would be better than say 2:30 in the afternoon. So there's 2 potential options, but I don't have a preferred day in the week. Just Friday seems to be a challenge for a lot of people, but then another day in the week may be just as big a challenge for others.
Well, just speaking to that, Lithgow Council tends to have its council meeting and committee meetings on a Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday. And so if you pick a day that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know, there's a potential to clashing, but it's unlikely that they clash on either Thursdays or Fridays.
And Oberon's Tuesdays.
Perhaps send something through.
Yes, I think.
So I think everybody sends theirs through as we collate it and try and find some middle
I'm
ground.
just wondering if we could quietly note when the respective council meetings. So Oberon's Tuesdays.
Well,
Lithgow's.
council meetings on Mondays, but other meetings are often on Tuesdays or Wednesdays.
So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, probably Lithgow.
We've got Wednesdays and Wednesdays, so committees and
Wednesdays for Bathurst.
Friday's great for me. Thursday, Friday, the best. Not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Friday is good day for us too.
Friday, good day for you? Yeah.
right. So out of session, let's put our feedback back to the general
Okay,
manager.
you've got what the council meetings are. That may sort of narrow the selection. Okay, we've had a mover and a seconder. Can we
Just on the times though, I'd like a 2 o'clock meeting rather than a 2:30 meeting, as long as it doesn't just make it, doesn't make the meeting just an extra half hour longer. But apart from that, the 2 o'clock meeting would suit me better.
Right, well, I think people come back on the times. We've got at least some idea of the days that we shouldn't have it on. All right, all in favour of the resolution, please, let's put as amended, thanks. Item 2 on new business, the statement of investments as at 30th of April 2022. Council notes the statement of investments report as at the 30th of April 2022. Have a mover, please. Member O'Connor.
I've got a query because it's actually the 31st of March according to the rest of the business paper.
What?
Statement of investments is headed 30th of April, is it?
Yeah, the
31st?
2 schedules are the 31st of March. Are
They're
they?
going quarters.
Right, so should it be 31st of March?
2021.
It should be the 31st of March on those other schedules, on table 2 and, except for table 1.
Yes, but
Table 1's wrong.
what I think is saying is 30th of April 22.
That part's correct. So
Is table 1 through you, Mr. Chair, as in
Just
correct for the end of April?
Section of the paper. The next item is the investment policy, item 3. The recommendation is council agrees to place a policy on public exhibition for 28 days. If after 28 days in public exhibition there is no feedback, then it becomes policy. Could I have a mover for the recommendation? Member Reynolds and Member Smith. Discussion on the policy, please. Member Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The policy is drafted off to a large extent the Blaney investment policy, so it's fairly close, but there are some modifications because Blaney has specific requirements that it has put in underneath the Act, or the Section 23A of the Local Government Act. What the main aim of it is, at the moment, we're pretty well restricted to a, well, at call account, I suppose you could say. I think it's 28 days, General Manager, 21 days. So our interest return is quite low. At the moment, in my council, we are now investing at over 2% on investments. I think it was 2.1 was the last. I have had a look around in the last couple of weeks and I've seen up to 2.2, 2.3 for 12 months with one of the financial institutions. So, but we need a policy so that we can actually go and invest and make sure, you've read the policy through, that only a proportion of the money is put at risk. And they also to note too, that the Commonwealth Government guarantees up to $250,000 in any investment in any one institution. So if we spread the risk around, as in we've got the Commonwealth Government's guarantee, as long as we don't go over 250,000 in one individual institution, we can though under this policy go higher, but that's a risk, you know, whether you want to, and I can't remember whether, I don't think I've written it in, the 250 maximum in any individual institution. But it's to try and improve our returns, but at the same time have them in A+ rated institutions, or A+ better and better. But there is the option, if the staff so decree, because I think it's on the General Manager's recommendation or approval that this money is invested, that we could go to a, you know, like a Reliance Bank and put in a proportion of money. But again, as long as it's no more than $250,000, because it's guaranteed if the institution was to fall over. So it's to try and improve our returns to get our bottom line to a better situation. And with interest rates rising at the moment, with the around about $1 million that we potentially could have to invest, you know, that's 20,000 a year under current, or 20,000 plus, whereas we're budgeted, I think, about 5, if I'm correct, General Manager, at the moment in the budget. What I would suggest though is that we put roughly $250,000 in each quarter, so that if the money is needed, money will come due in the next quarter. So I am again suggesting, once this is approved after the 28 days, if there are no objections, that we look at a 3-month term, a 6-month term, a 9-month term, and a 12-month term for approximately $1 million. So some will come due in 3 months' time, but then we can roll to 12 months. And so we'll have a rotation of every quarter moving forward, so that if we do become short of cash, money is available in a very short period of time.
Also allow us to take account of higher interest rates as they move through the system.
Yes, correct.
One of the things I've noted previously, that there has been some difficulty sometimes because of the rating of some of our institutions has not been at a level that, you know, allows us enough discretion within the limits of maximum holding at the top of page 3. Should at the moment, but should the ratings of any of our major institutions change, then that can sometimes be a problem.
But at this stage, it's applicable to current.
Yeah, and it does do, the second one is AAA-A category, so that covers quite a range. I'm not sure what I can't remember, I think all major banks are A-, aren't they?
Somewhere in the A's still.
Yeah, but if they're A-, then we can. Maybe I'm thinking of it.
I think
I had a look at an insurer the other day, and I know it was A-, it was a large insurer, but that may be right. You may be right. Okay. Any other discussion in relation to the investment policy? Member Fry.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Was there any consideration for ESG in this policy, or do you think that might preclude us from any significant investments, given it's only a small amount?
I've just come up with a policy on similar lines to one of the constituent councils.
Yeah, okay,
So I've looked at fairly conservative, is what I've put up through to the general manager, and the general manager has then reviewed and put this up as a document discussion. But again, if you wanted to provide feedback, as in we could not make a decision until the 28th day. We do have another meeting in just over 28 days. So we could potentially have a look at that.
Yeah, sure.
I was just going to make a comment on page 3 where all the question marks are about a third of the way down under the general manager. I'm assuming that's someone delegated by the general manager. I think if we're going to put that there, then we need to put a person in, not a name, but a position. And I realise that what's coming up later that may affect, but
Could we write their delegate or their delegate?
Well, do we want to, it will be per delegation from the general manager, but do we want to nominate the person who has the delegation?
No, I think we wait for advice on that one.
We can't have this question.
Cross it, but we can cross it out. I think they-
Why don't we just put authorised employee as by the council.
Yep.
You happy with that, Member Elizabeth? Good. I just don't like, we can't have question marks in the policy like that. Subject to that slight amendment, any other discussion? I put it to the vote. All in favour of the policy?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 4 is the third QBRS quarterly budget review statement. The recommendation, the council notes the third quarterly budget review statement for the financial year 2021-2022. Could I have a mover? Member O'Connor, Member Smith, thank you. Discussion, please, gentlemen. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is, when you look at the bottom line, it is somewhat concerning where we're at the moment, and the potential deficit if we were to expend what's been approved. To have a potential deficit of 180,000 is quite substantive. However, some of the approved expenditure probably won't take place, and so the bottom line from my reading, and particularly if you look at the right-hand column, which is just under $40,000 so far for the 3 quarters, may come in at a deficit, but somewhere between sort of 0 and about $50,000. Well, that's what I would hope. But it's a projection, and that's the problem. No matter what you do, it's on certain scenarios taking place to get to that bottom line. But probably a question through to the general manager on where we currently sit, and looking at cash flow in, for example, the aerial operation. That's right. So therefore, as in the area, make us some form of a profit. So therefore, as in
we budgeted on a $30,000 profit on that, I thought.
And we've already taken into account some of the wages though for it. So some of the expenditure has already come out. So the aerial operation should put us into a better position. But I'll throw some.
I'll ask you, the general manager, so you'll have a better idea than me.
Yeah, so the autumn aerial program actually fell right on the quarter. So it began and the programming and pulling together and collaborating, facilitating of the program began, and so expenditure had started prior to the end of the quarter. However, deposits were received prior, but they sit there as a liability, I think, until the program has actually been completed, which was after the end of the quarter. So that will be invoiced out after the end of this quarter. So we should start to see it coming all in, hopefully by the end of the financial year, hopefully, fingers crossed. And we'll see the benefits in the financial statements at the end of the financial year. So, but there is further expenditure that will come in. So the helicopter, for example, the contractor hasn't yet been paid. So that, and we didn't know how much that was going to be at the end of that quarter. So there will be some adjustment as a result of the aerial spraying program.
Do we have a helicopter bill now? Is it coming in about?
We're just finalising still numbers because there were some errors.
But it's about what expected.
Yeah.
Okay, and we don't anticipate, and the deposits account for what, at least 100% or 70% of the amounts we intend to.
It's more likely 50%.
50%.
We gather 50% deposit most of the time, depending on the person's
Risk profile.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so taking account of that on the basis that all the accounts are paid, then would we still be expecting about a $30,000 profit on that?
It's hard to say. I think yes. I think it should still be okay.
And so that could,
yeah,
and that has been taken account of in our projections, or would be could annihilate the deficit of 38,000.
No, I don't think it'll annihilate the deficit of the 30.
Okay, thank you. And the only other thing I think is that I did notice there was one table at 31st December on it.
Sorry about that. Pretty sure it's taken two.
All right, well, thank you, and thank you for all the hard work together with you and Reynolds. Greatly appreciated by the council. Any other discussion on the QBRS, gentlemen? We're all happy where it sits, and we acknowledge that there may be a small deficit at the end of the financial year. It's well within our reserves and easily capable of carrying it on.
And it should be noted, Mr. Chair, that as in we've spent $100,000 above budget on roadside weed spraying, so you would expect that we potentially could have gone into a deficit that was highlighted at the time when we approved that. So,
and that's in item 5 following.
yes, we
Go through it in detail. Yeah, I agree. We spent 100,000. I think people are even noting as much as 3 or 4 weeks ago we were still doing weed spray. So that's any other comments? All in favour of that the QBRS be accepted?
No.
Thank you. We go to item 5, which we alluded to a minute ago, the roadside spraying program 21-22. The recommendation is that council notes the report on the roadside spraying program for 2021-22. 2 is that council provides a report to each constituent council on their roadside spraying program for 21-22. If I could, just before we put the motion, when you look at the information below, the percentage of total on the right-hand column, council, we did discuss that at the last meeting. And I can't remember, but I think for most of them, it was around, most councils around, some of them were still not completed. It was around 21%, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Something for most councils. Bathurst was a bit higher, and someone was a bit like Lithgow might have been a bit lower.
Yes, yeah. I was hoping to include that in a report, in that to help on that set on number to the recommendation number 2 in a report provided to each constituent council.
That'd be great if you go back
Something like that.
to each council, because then that'll assist in working a rolling program. As to how we,
So, Mr.
So,
Chair,
can I have a mover?
I'm happy to move it.
Thank you, Member Reynolds. The second. Council Member O'Connor.
So could I suggest, Mr. Chair, with number 2, that when these reports go out to each individual council, that also a report, I said total report goes back to council on that. So a combined report, I suppose, from the 4 constituent councils.
Yes, that's the next meeting.
And could we include in those reports, please, the data about the other councils as well to each council, just to show what you're getting for your input, I suppose, to make sure the value is there.
Well, then maybe we just do a composite report.
Yeah, could be the same report that
The same
goes.
report goes to all councils.
That'd be easier.
I agree.
All the information.
Just because then it can give us, some lobbying power
Yes,
if there is a potential for.
and we'll also indicate that, I think obviously that report that we've used, because of the nature of the season and the nature of the year, we've used a proportion of our retained earnings to increase the spraying.
Yep.
As appropriately, so.
Really drive the value in.
But I think even having, so my view is we have a table similar to this, we have the roads lengths as is described here. And I think at the end, we then have, as was discussed at the last meeting, what this finally constitutes as a percentage of the total roads outside, with all those caveats, outside the township areas.
Yeah.
And the relevant caveats we put on last time, which was outside the township areas, and there was something else, wasn't there? Anyone remember? That was the main one. Okay. Any further discussion on this one, gentlemen? I'll put the motion. All in favour of the recommendation?
Aye.
Yes, thank you. Item 6 is pecuniary interest disclosure forms. Recommendation is council notes that pecuniary interest disclosure forms were tabled at this meeting, 13th of May 2022. Have they been tabled?
Just in front of the right.
So everyone's put one in?
Yes,
Fantastic.
everyone has.
So I commend council members for your promptness in doing that for this meeting. Could I have a mover, please, for that recommendation? Member Reynolds, Member Smith. Any discussion?
Well done, Matt.
Now, just
I was just going to make a comment, Mr. Chair, that it is available if any members of the public can come and request it at the front counter. Is that correct, General
I
Manager?
believe so, yes.
but the former general manager did put some restrictions on it because we argue that we
Addresses.
addresses.
It was to
That's
do with
right.
your addresses.
So the addresses don't.
They're not publicised.
Not publicised.
On the website or anything. I think that used to be a thing, that it used to be advertised, but it's not anymore.
So we argue that we're not in a council position where we can be a property developer or anything else, and that the addresses were inappropriate, and I think that was argued successfully, so that's why they're not. Okay, any other discussion on this pecuniary interest disclosure forms? Put the motion, put the recommendation, all in favour? Unanimous, thank you. Item 7 is the business activity strategic plan from 2023 to 2026-27, and the operational plan from 2022 and 2023. The resolution is that council authorise the acting general manager to make any changes as mentioned by members at this meeting prior to placing either of these any of these documents on public exhibition, because there's 3 of them.
No, there's 2.
There's 2, are there?
Yeah, this one falls as one.
Oh, that's the delivery plan, okay, right, sorry.
That's good.
Either of these documents on public exhibition, except the draft business activity strategic plan 2022-23 hyphen 2032-2033 to the public for 28 days. 3, exhibit the draft delivery program 2022-2023 hyphen 2026 hyphen 2027, an operational plan 2022-2023 to the public for 28 days. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor O'Connor, Member O'Connor, sorry. Member Watt. We have some discussion, please, on that. Member Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, I'd like to commend the acting general manager. This has been a huge effort, and I take my hat off to her for all the work that she has done to get these 3 plans and to redraft them. I think that's important, that we've actually modernised them, we've made them more accountable to what we're required to do. So I'd for start like to highlight that to the county council, to acknowledge the acting general manager for her contribution and many hours, literally hundreds of hours, I suppose you could say.
Supported by the Deputy Chairman.
Following that, Mr. Chair, it gives a good idea of where we sit from a financial point of view. So if you look at the 10-year plan, we've put in the potential expenditure, a lot of vehicle expenditure in the next couple of years, but also some other equipment, including spraying equipment and some office furniture and a web page, which I think is important too, that we look at modernising our web page, as well as some technology and equipment as well. So proposed around about $200,000 worth of capital expenditure next financial year, subject to quotations or requests for quotations. And looking further out, it'll wobble around the financial year after 23-24, about $120,000. Then it'll come down to 4,000, 34,000. But looking out about 5 or 6 years' time, when we have to replace vehicles again, quite substantial expenditure in 28, 29, and 29, 30 again. So it would have been nicer to have our vehicle fleet spread out, so we're replacing only 1 or 2 a year, but they've all come in sort of together with COVID and other factors. So that was one of the reasons why next financial year we have to replace 4, the year after another 3 vehicles. So that the fleet in 2 years, but we do have the cash, as we've discussed. We have fairly good cash reserves because we've been depreciating the existing fleet and building up our cash reserves and making a profit for the last few years. When you come to looking at the 10 years looking out, we've tried to be as conservative as possible, but it is important to note with the latest inflation figures at 5.1%, we've only estimated, I think it was to the acting general manager, I think it was about 4% next financial year wages. And depending on political outcomes, we may be seeing a higher wage increase, but also our running costs, things like diesel for our vehicles, tyres are becoming very, very expensive very rapidly. The price of tyres, I know in my local council or constituent council, that tyre prices, and we've had to make in our QBRS quite a substantial adjustment for tyre prices. Break even. And looking out from that, most of the financial years are a loss of between about 10 and 20,000, and looking further out over 30,000. And these are projections, crystal ball gazing. Once you get out more than about 2 years, it's very difficult to come up with a full estimate. But again, we spent a lot of time, the acting general manager and myself, trying to come up with realistic estimates. But again, they are subject to change because we just don't know what's going to happen in that crystal ball looking forward. So I think I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair. But I'm happy to myself or the acting general manager take questions if there are some from the constituent members.
Any other questions? I've got a question. If I put on the motor vehicle table 1, 10-year plan, we've got motor vehicle sundry. We're carrying about 5,000 to 6,000 throughout the 10 years. What's the motor vehicle sundry compared to the profit on sale of assets, which I understand, which is when we sell the motor vehicles? So I appreciate it.
Yeah. So motor vehicle sundry is income from where
private use.
Private use by staff.
Okay.
So where they pay for the use of the vehicle through their wages.
So noting that we're talking about, I think it was 2029-30 replacing more vehicles, we haven't allowed for any profit on sale of assets there.
Correct. You should change that.
Well, I'm asking because I think that would be worth.
We did allow for sale in 22, 23,
I
23, 24.
24, but
Yes.
we haven't allowed for anything in future years.
Correct. So I'm happy to amend and look at a similar figure if the county council would like to, through Mr. Chair to the general manager, as a suggestion.
That'll change the bottom line.
It will, and potentially put us into a positive profit from that for those couple of years.
Because I know that the depreciation, which is halfway down the final page, 24, sorry, not halfway down, I know I saw it before. It's about a third of the way down. And I'm assuming this includes the vehicle depreciation, 50, 60, 70, 65, 65, 60, then it goes to 30. Then it's up to 75 going across. That's about a third of the way down on page 24. If anyone's looking for it.
I'm happy to give an explanation, Mr.
That
Chair.
includes the depreciation. That's for the depreciation of vehicles, isn't it? Apart from other assets, but mainly vehicles.
So it's, I think it's 17%, if my memory serves me
Per
right,
year.
per year. And when we get up there, there's generally a year where we've written the vehicle off, and so it just depends on usage. So the number of kilometres and the years. And this last time around, there's been a year, so a substantial drop. If
So 17% for 6 years.
yes,
Yeah, that's what I understood.
except the last year is a reduced amount, but it depends when we buy them in the year too, because it might only be in the first year 10% because it's bought halfway through the year or in October or something.
If you took the purchase date right to the end, leaving aside the accounts, we're it's 17% of the value per year is what we're depreciating in the accounts.
And if you want to really get technical, in the first year, I've worked out from the 1st of July that we've replaced the 4 vehicles, whereas that won't be the case because physically we will not get vehicles for a number of months. So you just can't physically get vehicles. So there will be an overestimate in the first financial year of probably, at a guesstimate, Mr. Chair, between 10 and 20,000, depending on when we can get these vehicles. If they're not till Christmas, it's probably about 20,000 overestimate. But from sound accounting, we were making the assumptions for the 1st of July we would. So it's.
So what are members' views about having a valuation for vehicle sales in the future over 10 years? No. After,
How often do we replace it?
but we haven't allowed. There was a comment that I think from reading all this and from what was said, we're looking at a rather major renewal in 29-30 or something like that.
29-30. Yeah.
And we haven't put a value in there for, or if we're, and I think we're looking at is it 1 year, what did you say, one a year or 2 a year?
Sorry, we're looking at a 4 and a 3.
4 and 3, and thereafter, 24, 25, 25, 26?
Nothing
Nothing
until-
until 28, 29.
where they've bulked up again. Could I suggest, Mr. Chair, and to aid in time, that we put because in the resolution, it's the general manager can amend,
Yeah.
that in those 2 years when we sell the vehicles, that we put in, say, 50,000 and 40,000 as valuations, because again, it's crystal ball gazing, what it's going to be worth, then we really don't know, but as in at least we have a figure in.
Understand, but we're taking full value of depreciation, so by taking full value of depreciation and not taking account of potential sale price, you're not quite giving it.
Correct. So I'm happy to move to amend that. If move on a second, because I don't think I did either.
Was it member, I can't remember what? Are you happy with that amendment? I mean, general manager can make an amendment, but you're happy with that amendment for accounts?
Yeah.
Any other issues? Member Leslie?
Not so much an issue, it's just that as a county council, our core duty is reduction of weeds. It's simple as that. And I quite like the bit in the 10-year plan, the very clear statements. That I really like the way it was all set out. You know, heading points, you know, nicely laid out, beautiful sort of writing on it. But I'll just draw attention to one item, and that's the strategic biosecurity objectives, point 6 there, where it clearly points out to all our stakeholders, our landowners, our councils, and including such people as the railways, you know, and forestries, whatever, that, you know, our objectives, objective 1, you know, weed biosecurity risk detection and monitoring, and then a very clear a statement of what we want. And objective 2, weed biosecurity risk reduction. 3, weed biosecurity risk treatment programs, the weed biosecurity records and audits, and the weed biosecurity statutory reporting. We're clearly pointing out, for example, in the risk reduction, just the process by which we would, well, let me read. achieve a reduced overall level of weed biosecurity risk in the county district through an appropriate mix of cooperative compliance and enforcement compliance measures, with, ending with, for example, 2.6, court proceedings are instigated against any recalcitrant owner or occupier of land in accordance with, our compliance and enforcement policy. But it's there for anyone, any landowner, any of our stakeholders. There it is. Our program, our aim. So, it's no secret. It's we're looking for it. I congratulate the council for actually spelling this out so well. And so that,
Yes, I agree.
There's no excuse for people saying that, especially those in the area of farming, etc., would to say, well, we didn't know, and it's beautifully worded. Well done.
Thank you, Acting General Manager. Thank you, Reynolds. Okay, any further discussion on this? I'll put the recommendation. All in favour?
Aye.
I'll put the recommendation, 3 parts actually. Okay. Council. I'll read the purpose for this one. Following an amendment to Local Government Act 1993 during 2021, county councils may elect to make member council contributions to a nominated superannuation account from 1st of July 2022. The making of superannuation payments for councils is optional and is at the discretion of council. The recommendation is that council receive and note the report provided on the payment of superannuation contribution for councillors and commence making payment a superannuation contribution payment bracket as a contribution to a superannuation account nominated by a member councillor who elects to participate, starting from the financial year commencing 1st of July 2022. Can I have a mover, please? Member Reynolds and Member O'Connor. Thank you. Discussion on this, please. I think we're all aware we've been through this with our respective councils, so this won't be of a matter we're unaware of. Member Fry.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just feel like for such a small operating budget and a small council, that we perhaps don't need to pay superannuation for this particular body. That's my opinion.
So are you suggesting the second part is that we leave it up to members to make the decision, or you think we should?
So you're spelling it out. So you're saying a member can nominate or not nominate to receive superannuation.
That's the second part of the recommendation.
Perfect. Then I'm happy with that recommendation.
Unless you want to amend, and I don't know if we have the option. I'm not sure if we have the option to.
I feel like it's fine to accept it and allow councillors to make their own conscious decision based on our bottom line.
Obviously, the report details what's been introduced, but I can't remember when I read through it. I must admit I read through it when we're doing over on whether it allowed for councils to opt out of it as a whole or not. Can't remember. Anyone else?
I was just going to say, Mr. Chair, that it is budgeted.
Yes.
So it was budgeted for everyone, but there is no budgeted pay rise this financial year. So I believe there is a 2.5% recommendation of increase, and we are at full remuneration anyway. So what we proposed in the budget was that members could elect to take it. So there's allocation there, but there was no allocation for an increased pay rise, an increase in remuneration, sorry. This financial year, and I would suspect that a recommendation will come up to the next council meeting that their remuneration stay the same. So at the June council meeting, when we pass the budget, that will come up. But again, I think the most important word is it's optional.
Yeah.
So if each councillor's decision whether they want to accept it. It's only a small amount of money, as Member Fry has said, because if you take 10% or 10.5%, I think it is next financial year, of the remuneration of $4,000 per councillor outside of the chair, it's $425, is it, or $420? So
I feel like it would be
$20 a
a
year.
resource heavy exercise for a small nominated amount for each councillor.
But councillors have been asking for, a lot of councillors have been asking for superannuation at a council level. And so I think that, I think personally, that it should be offered to the members at a county council level as well.
Well, it's very clear on page 18, at the top of page 19. Should a councillor fail to provide an eligible superannuation account prior to the end of the month, but the payment is due, superannuation will not be paid in accordance with the guidelines contained in the New South Wales of the local management circular. And on the top of page 9, up to the council.
So we can offer that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to find out what the clerical implications of taking superannuation are. I mean, obviously, we're not talking about very much money, but if it's an onerous task, then that makes it well worthwhile to consider.
Is it a major payroll issue?
No, it's a fairly automated process through our accounting system. It wouldn't be too big a deal to process something like that.
Once it's in the system, it happens pretty well automatically.
Yeah.
It works out on the gross.
Well, given we're allowed to reject the scheme as a council, should we have that discussion?
Are we allowed to reject it as a council?
Member Leslie just read it out.
I thought that was individual members.
I think it was related to individual council laws.
Individual council laws.
Read it again.
It's at the top of page
But
19.
it's on the
Okay.
bottom of page 18, top of page 19. You can opt out by simply not giving them the superannuation account details, to start, or the
we
next
could
one,
resolve not to.
you can choose not to.
So should the council resolve to make superannuation contribution payments for its councillors? So it's saying we can resolve to make superannuation contribution payments.
That's my problem.
So we, on the council, we could resolve not to.
One would assume, Mr. Chair, that yes, Councillor Member Fry would be correct, that the council could reject the recommendation and say, no, we
So
don't.
are you proposing an amendment?
I feel like there is some hesitation in the room, so I'm happy to support the recommendation, and councillors can choose whether or not to take up the scheme. That's the easiest way around this.
You're entitled to make a proposed amendment that the council chooses not to take up the option of superannuation contributions if you wish to. It's up to you. It's up to any member.
I won't propose that amendment.
Okay. Any others? Sorry. Any others?
Sorry, very briefly, I don't think I've provided my details, so that actually makes it a fairly simple way of opting out, doesn't it? So.
You still need to provide your details to you, Mr. Chair, to remember what you still have to provide your details for remuneration.
Oh, yes,
And your bank account.
But you
Assume my
superannuation.
bank account, I may
You have to do superannuation
Yes,
separate.
yes.
Different. That's a bank account, this is a superannuation account. Completely.
So the circular says to exercise the option of making superannuation contribution payments for their councillors, councils must first resolve at an open meeting to make superannuation contribution payments for the councillors. Where a council resolves to make superannuation contribution payments to its councils, the amount of the payments to be the amount the council would have applied on the superannuation guarantee.
So it is an option, keyword option.
Yeah.
as I said, Mr. Chair, you could reject the recommendation or that we don't. Personally, I'd support choice. So, and then we come back to the budget and go, okay, well, I think, should we then have a pay rise next month? I think we can discuss that one. But we will either way, because we could.
All right, do we have an amendment or do we not have an amendment? I think we don't.
I think
Okay.
I believe, for example, Orange City Council, 3 councillors rejected it.
Yes.
So I don't know about other councils, but that's what the media is claiming in Orange. So yeah, as in, you don't have to accept it.
All right, we're up to notice of motion. The notice of motion is put by member Bruce Reynolds, that the general manager provide a plan to the county council members before 30th of June 2022 on how the county council aims to achieve its weed action program inspection targets for 2022-23. I'll ask councillor member Reynolds to speak to this, but as we're all aware, our WAP funding is dependent on inspection targets. Thank you.
So do I have a seconder before I?
Sorry, we have
I'll
a
second that.
proposer, second member Leslie.
So, Mr. Chair, as you've highlighted, we've just looked at the budgets looking forward. We have certain targets that are met, need to be required to be met to actually receive our funding. And in looking at next financial year, and looking at the WAP funding agreement, it looks as though we will meet a certain target, but not a target to increase our funding. So potentially we could have inflation of 5% next financial year, and wages may go up more as we move forward, 2.5%. The staff are currently seeing an increase, it could go much higher. So this is one of our major funding options or opportunities. And at the moment, we don't appear to be meeting the upper target. So there's probably 2 targets to actually achieve extra funding. So there's the possibility of extra funding, but again, as in to give the county council a guidance on how we potentially could achieve the maximum amount of funding out of the WAP program. So I've therefore proposed, so that then, similar to the budgets we've just put out on public exhibition, that the staff have a plan for the next 12 months on how they can achieve the maximum or optimum outcome for the county council with regard to inspections, which are a requirement under the WAP funding. So that's hence why I put this motion of notice up, Mr. Chair, so that we can see as a council the plan of the staff to undertake and implement our funding deed that we have with the New South Wales government through local land services on with regard to the WAP funding. I think that pretty well sums it up. I'm happy to take questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Member Leslie, yes.
Yes, I agree. We don't want any snafu that might inhibit us getting the full funding that we're entitled to, and therefore a plan to how to achieve it is essential.
Thank you, Member Leslie. Member Fry.
Just a question for that general manager. What's would this piece likely be sort of delegated or advised by the chief weeds officer? I'm assuming would help drive that plan.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that would be my intention, and looking forward to the new general manager, incumbent general manager, to work with him. And I feel like that would be a really good way for him to get to those operations at the same time and to build that.
If of course, if that happens, and to build that strategic plan. Is 6 weeks enough? If we chose to appoint a general manager permanently, is 6 weeks enough to get this done?
I believe so. I believe the previous general manager began to put this together.
Okay.
And so there is a template there that could potentially be used for future, but just maybe a bit more detailed
Cool.
from the operations perspective.
Current data
It
too.
was also foreshadowed at the last meeting, I believe.
Yes.
Twice, when the chief weeds biosecurity officer was here.
Copy. Thank you, Chair.
Any other discussion, John? Okay, all in moving into confidential, council notes 9(2) of the Local Government Act 1993, the general manager is the opinion of businesses on the agenda designated confidential, listed in the following table. One is a kind referred to in section 10(a)(2) close bracket of the Act, and should be dealt with in a part of the meeting, close to the media in public, and further in accordance with section 10(b)(1) close bracket of the Act, is considered the discussion of the business in open meeting would on balance be contrary to the public interest. Council notes the two matters are confidential. Can I have someone to move us into confidential, please? Member Fry, Member Smith, thank you. I ask the recording of the meeting cease, please. Noting also that the county chairman's report is considered in confidential. It is part of the it forms part of confidential purposes of this meeting. Okay, I'll ask the general manager to read the two approved recommendations from confidential, please.
The county chairman's report number 1, general manager recruitment recommendation, was adopted that the report on process and outcome of the recruitment process and the interviews conducted for the position of general manager of Upper Macquarie County Council be received and noted. Number 2, the preferred candidate Timothy Johnston, selected at the interview on 29th of April 2022, be offered the position of general manager of Upper Macquarie County Council, and the chair, Councillor McGibbon, be authorised to negotiate and finalise the appointment based on the following terms and conditions. A 3-year term. B, total remuneration payment of $112,164, inclusive of superannuation contribution of 10.5%, effective from 1st of July 2022. C, a 20-hour working week. D, the contract of employment be in accordance with the standard contract for general managers in New South Wales. Number 3, no public announcement of the name of the successful candidate.
So what do you think, mate?
Yep, we just did.
But other than that.
Yeah, apart from that, as a written acceptance of the offer from the preferred candidate, that it be noted a performance agreement will be prepared by the chairman and the deputy chairman, so Andrew McGibbon and Bruce Reynolds, within 2 months of the general manager commencing the role, to align the council and the GM with a core group of agreed objectives. Number 5, that council maintain the confidentiality of the documents and considerations in respect of the GM recruitment process. Item 9 under confidential. Council notes the report 38 2022 biosecurity risk register.
Thank you. That concludes our meeting. The meeting concluded at 3:58 p.m.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good process, but we got there.
See you in June.
We have been generally managed.